everyone, this is the 5th chapter of the simple motion graphics series. In this video we are going to create these kind of motion graphics using the geometry nodes. So let's get started. So first we're going to add our host object. So let me call this layers animation. So next we're going to add the geometry nodes modifier to this. We're going to delete this. In this chapter we're going to use the techniques that is similar to the chapter 4. So let me add the C line, the curve line. Okay, so we have this. So let me align this along the x-axis. So we have this. So basically we're going to create layers with this line. So we're going to add the transform geometry node so that we can change its scale around 6. Then we're going to duplicate this setup and we have this one. Let me type here 4. Okay, then we're going to resample this using the resample node, and we're going to use that the length. So let me add the value node, and then we're going to duplicate this node and also add that here. And after that we're going to add the curve to mesh node, and we're going to use this as profile. So we have something like this, and if I enable the wireframe, see, it has spare polygons. So with this we can easily increase its resolution. So with this you can control its length, and with this you can control its width. Okay, and next we're going to add the UV map to this grid. We're going to add the capture node, capture attribute, and also duplicate that and add that here. So next we're going to add the spline parameter node. So we're going to capture the factor of this spline. So that is linear gradient along the spline from 0 to 1. Let's also capture that for the profile. And now we can combine them using the XYZ combine node. So this value for the X and this value for the Y. So if we view this, so we have this UV map. So next we can store that on this mesh. First change that to 2D vector because we are storing the UV map, and also change that to face corner. So let's type here UV map. Okay, so now we have this grid with the UV map. We can add the frame. So this is our grid. Okay, or you can call this layer. Next we're going to add the C line, the curve line node. Then we're going to resample that. Let me change the count to 7. After that we're going to add the instance on points node, and we're going to instance this grid. Okay, let me connect this to the output. See, we have this. Now with this we can easily modify this. So next we're going to realize this because we need the real geometry, okay, not the individual instances. Then we're going to add the set position node, and we're going to offset these layers based on the noise. Okay, next we're going to add the v scale, the vector scale node, so that we can control the offset. And after that we're going to add the multiply node, vector multiply node, and with this we're going to select the component of the noise. So let's add the noise texture, connect this color to this multiply node, and here we only want the Z component of this noise. See, so let me type here 1, disable this option. So next we're going to make the details 0 and decrease the scale. Okay, something like that. Because these layers are really close to each other in the 3D space, they have a similar pattern of the noise, only a small offset from layer to layer. Okay, so if we use the right value of the offset, we can mimic the cloth-like simulation or cloth-like movement of these layers with the noise. So next we're going to add the position node. We're going to add vector node. So with this we're going to offset the X component of the position for the noise. We can add the combine node, XYZ combine node. Then we can add the multiply node here, and here we can add the frame. So now if we run this, maybe 0.1, yeah, something like that. See, they are not intersecting, but we have this kind of motion. And you can also offset the Z component of these layers. Okay, so let me duplicate this one and plug this to the Z, and let me decrease the speed of the Z. So we have this, and here we can also store the spline factor that we can use in the material. So let me add the spline factor, and let's call this gradient. So we have this kind of gradient along these layers that we can use in the material. So let me show you that. See, we have this kind of gradient, so we can use that for the color variation. So next we're going to add a unique material to each layer. Okay, so let me add the set material node. I have downloaded different materials from the Blender Kit add-on. They are completely free. I'll provide the link in the video description. And if you install that add-on, you can also get the materials by typing like hair cloth. So it will provide you a lot of materials. So they are completely free that you can use in your project. So now we have these different materials and we want to assign them to these layers. Okay, so there are different ways to assign a unique material to these layers. So in this case, we're going to use the mesh island node. So let me add the mesh island node. So basically this node provide a unique index for the mesh island. So let me change that to text and also enable that here. So let me zoom that. See, bottom layer has 0 index, the upper layer has this 1 index, and the next one has 2, and so on. Okay, so we can utilize that. So we can add the equal node, then we can plug that into the selection. Here we can select, let's say, this material. See, this is assigned to the bottom layer or the first layer, then the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and the seventh layer. Okay, so we can group them this like create a group. Okay, so we can output the index and also the material. So let me change the name. Let's call this index. So now we have a simple setup that allow you to set the material based on the mesh island. Hide the node options. We can duplicate that, change the material, let's say carbon fiber. We can change the index. So we have this. In this way, you can assign different material to these layers. So now we have this. So next we're going to add a thickness to these layers. So we're going to use the solidify modifier. Okay. After that, we're going to add the bevel modifier to this. So let me go to the solid mode. Okay. Use to count here. Probably we can decrease this. Okay. And here we can also decrease this one. So we have these cloth layers of different material. So next we're going to add the lighting. Let's go to the shading. First I'm going to decrease the light from the HDR image. So I'm using the same HDR image that I have shown in my previous chapters. Let's use around 0.2. And let me also hide that from the background. So we have this. So let's first align the camera properly. Change that to cycles and then this to GPU and also enable the denoise. So we have this. So for the lighting, we're going to use several area lights to create the stripe pattern on this. Okay, and then we can parent all these lights to the first one. Okay, like this. Now we can easily play with this lights. I think we have slightly moved the camera so that we don't see the background. something like that. Nice. So this is how you can create amazing motion graphics with the geometry nodes. Now I'll break down my second project file. So we have this one. It has the same setup. Only thing is that I have increased the thickness of these layers from this solidify modifier. And another thing is that I used this weighted normal modifier. Okay. And after that, for the material, so we have this kind of gradient that I've shown earlier. Then I used this color ramp to assign this kind of color. And after that, I used only a small value of the color for this material. Okay. So this is the metallic material. You can also use this one, but I used like this dark one. So this is the base material. So for these layers, and next I have created this kind of pattern on these layers using the Voronoi noise. So we have the UV map for these layers. Okay. Then I use the Voronoi texture, then the color ramp to get only these dots on these layers. And after that, I mask them because I don't want them at the front faces. Okay, like this. And we have this. So without the mask, we have something like this. Okay. And with this mask, we can remove them. So this mask is based on the normal of the geometry. Okay. So we have this material. So for the lighting, I use the HDR lighting with 5 strength, and also I have added this light so that we don't have the harsh shadow. If I mute this, see we have this, and with this light, we have some highlights from the front. You can create amazing motion graphics with this technique and the geometry nodes. This is it. I hope you learned something from this video. You can get the project file from my Patreon page and also pre-access the remaining chapter of this motion graphics series. So thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Happy noding. Bye.